kept Michigan locked into higher cost fossil fuels, reduced innovation, and distorted consumer choice in the state's transportation and primary energy markets. All we want is to ensure a fair, open energy marketplace where innovative, lower-cost technologies can compete on the merits, so Michigan consumers and businesses are no longer stuck paying a premium in order to subsidize big oil's public relations. We expect oral argument in this case to take place in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Michigan in late summer or early fall. Now, these companies, as you know, are extremely powerful, and they are experienced at manipulation, and their industry has enjoyed decades of institutional support, but they are not above the law. For example, back in April, the United States Supreme Court ruled unanimously, 9-0, in favor of my department sending our Line 5 lawsuit back to state court where it has always belonged. We filed this lawsuit in state court against Canadian oil company Enbridge to shut down the Line 5 dual pipelines in the Straits of Mackinac, and we did it over 7 years ago. A major spill would directly threaten the drinking water supply that serves nearly 40 million people. And the location of the dual pipelines, which carry millions of gallons of oil a day and are exposed to the open water at the bottom of the straits, combines great ecological sensitivity and exceptional vulnerability to anchor strikes. And Line 5 has not gotten any safer with age. Constructed back in 1953, the pipeline is now 73 years old. It was meant to be commissioned after less than 50 years, and it is operating on borrowed time. There are numerous other ways that oil products can be transported to the consumers that need them without endangering our Great Lakes. There's railroad infrastructure as well as excess capacity on alternate pipelines that do not cross major water bodies. And in a recent report, experts estimated that markets would adapt to the shutdown of Line 5 within 6 to 18 months. The economic impact of an orderly, court-ordered shutdown will be almost nothing, especially when compared to the economic, not to mention environmental impact, if the pipeline ruptures and is shut down with no warning at all. And we argued this case in state court based entirely on state law for more than a year before Enbridge filed to remove it to federal court, and we've been fighting to return this case to its proper venue ever since. The Supreme Court's ruling puts an end to the Enbridge forum shopping maneuvers and will hopefully expedite the resolution of this case. Also, in a separate case, Enbridge v. Whitmer, the district court held that 2 federal laws divested the state of Michigan of its property rights. 1, the Pipeline Safety Act, and 2, a 1977 Transit Pipelines Treaty between the United States and Canada. Now, that conclusion is unprecedented, and I believe it to be just plain wrong. My department filed a challenge on behalf of the governor in the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, and briefing is scheduled to conclude by the end of July. Now, we are confident in our arguments, and we are very pleased to have received amicus briefs in support of our position from foreign relations professors, preemption, energy law, and environmental law scholars, a coalition of states, a coalition of tribal nations, the Great Lakes Business Network, the Sierra Club, and For the Love of Water. Some of the other issues that you're well aware of with the MPSC. In July, we're also expecting the Michigan Supreme Court to issue a decision about Enbridge's proposed Line 5 replacement project. And in December of 2023, the MPSC issued an order authorizing Enbridge to reroute Line 5 through a tunnel under the Straits of Mackinac. The tunnel is ever approved and constructed. As you well know, that decision is being challenged in the Michigan Supreme Court by your organization and others. Now, while my department has not directly challenged the MPSC's decisions. I did submit an amicus brief recommending that the case be remanded to the MPSC so that additional evidence could be submitted, and it is imperative to ensure that the proposed replacement project undergoes a complete and thorough environmental review. We are also expecting decisions to be made soon by Eagle, DNR, and the Army Corps of Engineers on Enbridge's applications for permits that are needed to construct the proposed Line 5 replacement tunnel. Whatever the agencies decide, legal challenges are sure to follow. Now, in addition to all this specialized litigation, the lawyers in my office also continue to do their day jobs. We've made a point of intervening in every single utility rate hike case brought before the MPSC since I took office in 2019. In doing so, we've saved Michigan ratepayers over $4.6 billion. But remember, these companies are monopolies. Michigan's public utility customers don't get to choose who provides their heat or electricity. It just comes with the house. You can't shop around for a better deal. Now, my department's goal is to make sure the utilities are only asking for what they really need. But we find that more than half the requests in most rate cases are irrelevant or unnecessary. Outrageous line items like private jet travel for utility executives or funding incentive programs that are aimed only at boosting profits rather than reliability. By the way, did you see the article that for the last 12 years, DTE hasn't even paid taxes? How do we get that deal? Now, my department's lawyers scrutinize these requests, pick out all of the unnecessary add-ons, and make our case to the MPSC. But it's the commissioners who make the final decisions on rates, and usually they just split the difference between the unjustified number the utility requests and the figure we determine is genuinely required in order to maintain operations. Now, it's worth noting that DTE and Consumers Energy just so happen to be two of the state's foremost political donors. So what we find is this: no matter which party is in power, their profits continue to rise each and every year. And no matter which party is in power, there never seems to be a real appetite for systemic reform. Year after year, we keep pouring money into this system that isn't delivering on its promise to Michigan ratepayers. And what we have seen now that hyperscale AI data centers are beginning to set up shop in Michigan is the same commission will grant the utilities expedited approval on heavily redacted contracts with minimal collateral, moving the approval process behind closed doors so neither the public nor any of the advocates in my department are even permitted to review the terms that are being agreed to. And I am not willing to gamble Michigan's energy future on the uncertain promise of repayment next week, next month, next decade, or maybe never. Because it's not like our state can go without heat or electricity. Companies like DTE and Consumers Energy are simply too big to fail. And if they land in hot water because of risky investments, what happens to the millions of Michiganders who rely on their services? It would be up to us as the ratepayers, or perhaps even the taxpayers, to bail those companies out. Now, my department has been clear from the start. We would like to see investors from the entire the entire cost of construction for any data centers with added contractual obligations preventing them from passing off any unanticipated expenses to their existing customers. And we're also asking that companies set aside enough money to cover decommissioning so our state is not left with blighted buildings littering our communities if and when the AI bubble bursts, which it definitely will. We cannot rely on pinky promises from the utilities who have proven that they have no qualms lying right to our faces in order to line their pockets. My department has fought the MPSC's ex parte approval for DTE contracts to service a 1.4 gigawatt Oracle data center in Saline Township every step of the way, including appealing their decision to the Michigan Court of Appeals in April. This follows our attempt to intervene, public calls for a contested case, a petition for rehearing, and a motion to reopen the case. With this appeal, my department is seeking to invalidate the Commission's unlawful ex parte approval of the contracts, and we hope that the court will remand the matter back to the MPSC for a contested case hearing. Briefing is currently underway, and we just filed a brief with the Court of Appeals earlier this week. We have an opportunity, as this industry is still in its infancy, to set the terms for our future selves. But if we don't make our voices heard now, the opportunity to welcome this industry into our state responsibly will pass us by, and we'll be forced to live with the consequences of bad contracts, rush deals, and cut corners for decades and generations to come. So, with that, in conclusion, Michiganders are starting to recognize that our reliance on analog technologies, especially in the energy sector, is taking its toll on our environment and on our economy. And in these last few months of my term as AG, we will continue to defend Michigan residents and our environment with every tool at our disposal to protect our precious natural resources and to develop an affordable energy future. It is my sincere hope that whoever comes next after me will take up the banner and to continue to fight alongside all of you. And if they won't make that commitment, and they won't make that commitment publicly, they don't deserve your support. Friends, now is the time to act with great urgency, to invest in solutions for the future, not roll back the minimal progress we've made so far, or buckle under the pressure of new threats. It's going to take courage and persistence, but I know that the people in this room never back down from a challenge, do you? So enjoy the conference. If I knew you were going to be doing a whole session on MPSC, I would have stayed. Learn as much as you can and let the lessons from today fuel the work in your communities until we can meet again. So thank you so much for being amazing partners to me these last 7.5 years. It has been the privilege and honor of a lifetime to count myself as a member of your team.
Perfect. Right? Very good. Very good. Whew. Wow, everybody. Let me get one thing here. Please stay in your seats. We're going to continue. Whew, except for you fine panelists. If my panelists would come on and join me, I'll make a couple of things. Whew, wow. Wow, right? Our Attorney General, folks. She really also set us up for the day. Those are the issues that we're going to be talking about, how our Michigan Public Service Commission operates, all the actions that you can take to make effective comment. There's going to be a workshop that builds on all that to make sure you know how to make that change happen. Please keep your seats. I'm going to continue with our opening panel here. I'm going to model a couple housekeeping things really quick. I think and hope my team is great. They are putting some note cards and pens on your table, and I have a collection person here, right here with me today. So what happens, we should have time for a few questions, I hope so. So write your questions on those cards, and Everell here will come around and collect them and bring them up to me if we have a little time at the end of this session. The second thing that we're going to model in this session today is our art and culture mission. Again, we collected nearly 20 climate art submissions from across the state. They are being showcased in the Red Cedar Room right down the hall today. And in case you can't make it over there, we wanted to make sure we fully integrated that into our program this year. So all of the sessions in this room should be accompanied by some artistic performance. And we're going to be really lucky in our opening panel today because one of our speakers is going to do that for us in just a minute. This opening plenary session is going to continue the discussion you just heard about how we are challenged by a hostile federal administration, but how different sectors, the climate crisis is intersectional, how they are responding to that. We're going to hear from national security experts, how clean energy is national security. We're going to hear from a public health expert. Why are we not listening to science, right? I would hope that we would want leaders who at least wanted to know the truth, right? How we are dealing with higher education. All these young people here, what kind of future are we really supporting them with? And of course, data centers and digital justice from an organizer's point of view. The speakers are going to share their challenges and approaches to the way forward against the backdrop that we are living in. Our first speaker is also our first artist. Tawana Petty is a long time, yeah, I can give it up. Tawana's here, everybody. You're in for a treat if you haven't heard Tawana speak before. She's a longtime organizer, the executive director of Petty Propopolis, and an amazing poet. And after reading her poem, Tawana is going to speak on data justice and the impacts on health and resources as related to the usage of data and privacy and other concerns. Tawana, you can either join me here or we can turn on a mic there. Please welcome Tawana.
Good morning. Or in Detroit, we say, what up, though? So before we get started, I want to, because I'm going to speak from a Detroit perspective, born and raised, still live there. And yeah, you can shout that out. Yes, yes. I'll be a half century old in August. And so my whole life has been there. And so I'll start off with a Detroit love poem. We were supposed to turn our backs on you, count down to your imminent demise, dangle you by the limbs of misdeeds. They wanted us to rate you inferior, plagued by deteriorating neighborhoods and a convoluted history. You were never supposed to bloom from your ashes. A lot like you have been discarded like debris, deemed useless to naysayers and convictors, yet you keep rising, clinging to vitality. You refuse to allow statistics to dictate your destiny, and the media will channel your journey. And though some shall remain loyal, others will mock your tribulations. You were combing a young into maturity. Both your gift and your curse, imported from adversity. You've seen better decades, yet you thrive during the worst of them. Your best days have yet to arrive, and though some won't stick around to witness your climb or rejoice in your restoration, your destination is inevitable. You've been on the bottom much longer than most, and the bridges you'll journey won't be easy to coast, but you will make it and bring warriors with you, armed with devotion. They will defend your dignity and honor your namesake. You are Detroit, the road to progression, the mirror image of endurance, and you hold the key to taking back our democracy. How y'all doing? Okay, whoever did that whistle, I am so jealous. I've been trying to whistle. Please, I've been trying to whistle for like 45 years, and it just, I can't get it. And so I'm gonna do a little, listen, I have rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. I don't wanna take up my time, but I'm on this little device here, so I'm just gonna go through it. My My work is rooted in data and digital justice, privacy and consent, and I consider myself a water rights affordability advocate. I've been accused of being a polymath, and I accept that. If you don't know what a polymath is, it's somebody whose interests seem to be all over the place, but in my mind, they intersect. But what I've come to understand after years of lived experience, work and research efforts, is that there can be no climate justice as long as communities live in environments that are marginalizing, extractive, and hyper-surveilled. And so racial capitalism breeds disaster capitalism, breeds surveillance capitalism. And this trajectory is in direct contrast to healthy environments that are able to sustain climate accountability and environmental justice. But how do we get into situations where communities must prioritize their focus on day-to-day survival, which often deprioritizes proactive measures that can support climate justice initiatives? One of the most measurable ways is through narrative assaults on those communities and the policies that are absent or wielded against them because of those narrative assaults. A community that has been dehumanized for decades is less likely to have advocates who sustain efforts towards justice in their favor outside of the very residents that are directly impacted by those systems. And so to provide a bit of clarity, I want to take you on a narrative journey through Detroit, the city I was born in, raised in, and still live in, a city which currently has a median household income under $40,000 per year, has more than 50% of its young people living in poverty, with 30% not having access to broadband internet for their positive use, despite AI hype and biometric surveillance being prevailing across the city. We know that just because you don't have access to systems, it doesn't mean those systems don't have access to you. Detroit is a city that, despite the pervasiveness of the Detroit is coming back narrative, which I equate to make America great again, still shuts off water because the assistance plans frequently run out of money, which should not be conflated with water affordability. And despite water affordability efforts being pursued for a couple of decades now through environmental justice organizations, we have not been able to push that policy forward. But there are efforts through like the Well Coalition, People's Water Board, We the People of Detroit, who are still pursuing that work. So please support those efforts. As I said, I was born in 1976. So I'll be turning 50 this year. And for more than a half century, Detroit has suffered under pervasive negative narratives. Though there have been efforts in recent years to kind of remove those narratives because they want white, wealthier investment in the city, and you can't really crap on a city if you want people to come and spend money in the city. It just doesn't work that way. And so, unfortunately, though, when environmental, economic, and social justice efforts are on the table, guided by community, those ugly narratives rear their head. So let me give you an example. In 1977, I told you I was born in 1976. In 1977, there was a film, you may be familiar with it, called A Kentucky Fried Movie. Are you all familiar with that? And so there was an episode called A Fistful of Yen. And in A Fistful of Yen, there was this one scene in the movie. It's supposed to be a comedic spoof. And the thing that they would do as the most severe, drastic punishment was to take you to Detroit. And so this is 1977. So all of the punishments that were imposed, everything from the most violent punishments you could think of, the worst punishment was to be taken to Detroit. That's 1977. In 1987, how many of you are familiar with RoboCop? It's a film I grew up loving, right? But what's the narrative around that film? A police officer is murdered, and then this tech corp creates a cybernetic cop who's gonna come and like restore order in the city of Detroit. That's 1987. I'll skip ahead because I could go every year, literally. But 2007, Cade Benfield wrote an article, "Is it time to change the narrative about Detroit?" And in that article, Cade said, "The standard narrative of Detroit has been about a bankrupt, vacant, decaying, post-industrial wasteland, an environmental, social, and economic disaster. Detroit has been the quintessential shrinking city, a poster child for everything that has gone wrong with the post-industrial Midwest." It's 2007. 2013, you may or may not know, Detroit is in the Epstein files. And Epstein basically said that Detroit is a petri dish ripe for experimentation. National Geographic, cover of National Geographic, 2013, "Tough, cheap, and real, Detroit is cool again." 2014, "Drop Dead Detroit." That was an article by Paige Williams where L. Brooks Patterson, how many of you are familiar with L. Brooks Patterson? A very wealthy Oakland County executive who wielded a lot of political power, not just in Oakland County, but also over Detroit, which basically said that we should put a fence around Detroit and corral everybody in and throw in the blankets and corn, which was reminiscent of how genocide was inflicted upon indigenous communities. And so I say all that to say that when you have pervasive, dominant narratives wielded for decades over a city, it makes it difficult for people to advocate for policies that are humane, whether climate, environmental, data, water rights, housing. You may or may not know that Detroiters were overtaxed by over $600 million, and that has not been rectified. Many Detroiters have lost their homes as a result and will never get them back. Legacies of wealth just erased overnight. And so I will move on to say, this is why interrogating the billionaire tech oligarchy agenda for Detroit is so important. It is why we must ask deeper questions with defense contractors when they move to our waterfronts to pursue artificial general intelligence. It is why we must interrogate when drone conferences and their surveillance displays traverse our land, air, and water. When corporations waging wars all over the world host conferences in our city and market us as the arsenal of democracy yet again. Detroit has learned after World War II what it feels like to be chewed up, spit out, and marginalized by industry. It is why our voices must be louder when it appears that we are moving the country, the climate, and the city backwards. When our factories are approached to retool for war efforts, the tech oligarchies have been sworn into the military, and the administration has become indistinguishable from big tech, big oil. We have to challenge that. So this is why we must at all costs pursue peace and racial justice. That is the only way to rescue our climate. Thank you.
Thank you. She deserves being a stand up. And kicking us off with a poem. Oh my Lord, Tawana. Let's think about the stories we tell today as you learn those skills to use that tool and to carry around your pocket all day, right? Our words matter. That's why we're out there doing these campaigns. Our next speaker is Francesca Resnick, a senior associate at Converge Strategies, where she designs workshops, conducts landscape assessments, and supports community advocacy organizations with strategy and policy planning. Francesca's expertise is on the role clean energy can play in national security. Francesca, come talk to us about this. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, Denise. This opening plenary is about finding a way forward against real federal headwinds and about how all of our fights in the climate movement are connected. I've been asked to tackle the security thread because it is what I work in every day. But I am grateful that I was, because I do think it is the most useful argument that we have for the people who don't yet count themselves on our side. And I know this from experience. I'm currently working with red states all over the Midwest and right-of-center organizations all over the country. And the national security frame is one of the most effective tools that we have when we want to talk to these people about climate. And like the AG said, we need to use every tool that is available in our toolbox. We can't do this work alone. While I'm here to talk about energy and national security specifically, there are really two security threats in this room, and they are bound together. Climate change is one, and our dependence on fossil fuels and an outdated, centralized electric grid is the other. The clean energy transition is the rare answer that takes on both at the same time. Let's start with climate change. Defense planners have called climate change a threat multiplier for a long time, and they mean that. The US Department of Defense, or War, has studied climate change as a security threat for more than 35 years. The Pentagon did not take this up out of a sentiment for polar bears. It took it up because a destabilized climate degrades readiness, strains bases, snaps supply chains, and feeds the very conflicts we then send our forces into. Drought, flooding, and heat move people, sharpen the competition over water and food, and turn fragile regions into the next deployment zone. This makes climate change a literal national security threat. You can see the same here at home in our increase in extreme weather. 2024 was the 14th year in a row with 10 or more separate billion-dollar disasters in this country. From 1980 to 2023, we averaged 9 such events a year. Over the last 5 years, the average has been 23. And those disasters drove roughly 80% of major US power outages between 2000 and 2023. The thing destabilizing the climate is the same thing knocking out the power every storm season in communities like the ones each of us serves. And our entire domestic military apparatus is also depending on this very same grid to keep the lights on. Which brings me to the second threat, what we burn and the grid we run it on. Fossil fuels expose every American family and every American military base to price shocks set thousands of miles away. This spring handed us the clearest reminder in years. When the US went to war with Iran in late February, oil traffic through the Strait of Hormuz seized up, and families have watched the price of a gallon of gas in Lansing get set by a conflict in the Persian Gulf. The ceasefire reached in April has been officially broken, and prices are once again swinging. As of last week, federal stocks of oil have dropped to their lowest since 2004. Unless the Strait reopens soon, which seems more than unlikely after yesterday's most recent round of hostilities, prices could hit $200 per barrel by summer, according to some experts. 4 years after Russia's invasion of Ukraine set off the last global energy crisis, we are relearning the same lesson. A system that leaves us this exposed is not safe. Not safe for the government, not safe for the military, and not safe for the American people. The grid itself is the other half of that threat. It grows more vulnerable every year to physical and cyber attacks. And these are not theoretical boogeymen. They are real and happening. Cyber attacks on US utilities rose about 70% in 2024 over the year previous. Physical attacks climbed at a comparable pace, roughly 71% between 21 and 23. And in 23 alone, 60 physical attack-related incidents caused outages. A grid built around a few enormous generators is brittle by design. Trip one, and you can cascade into a failure that is slow and hard to restart, the way we have watched play out across parts of Europe. A system that has deprioritized interregional transmission for years is unprepared to help fellow Americans when there is a disaster or crisis, whether natural or man-made. The reality of the grid lands hard on defense stakeholders. Our military installations are 98% reliant on power from the commercial grid. Backup power does exist for critical missions, but it is typically sized for only about 2 weeks, which may not be enough. Additionally, that backup is often not actual fuel in a tank on a base. Bear with me while I get technical, but this is demonstrative of why our reliance on physical fuels leaves us exposed. When bases have a backup plan for power, it's not always extra fuel stored on site, but usually it is a contract with a supplier. And unsurprisingly, contracts can break when roads wash out, when the electricity that pumps the fuel goes down, or when the infrastructure around the base fails. And on top of that, the reality most people forget is that the personnel who run these missions and their families mostly live off base, beyond the reach of this backup power, if it even works. We cannot ask a service member to keep their head in the fight during a national emergency while their family sits at home with no power and no running water. A security line drawn at the installation gate does not make us safe. So we have two threats, a changing climate and a fossil-dependent brittle grid. And they reinforce one another. Why is clean energy the answer to both? We all know the first part of the answer. Transitioning the economy to renewable energy sources cuts the emissions driving the first threat. But it is also built to defeat the second. The fuel is domestic by definition. Sun, wind, and water belong to no adversary and cannot be embargoed, sanctioned, or held hostage in a strait halfway around the world. A clean energy system is also inherently distributed. A single missile or storm can take down a substation, but neither can take down a million rooftops. And once it is built, the cost holds steady. Solar and storage generated on a military base itself is the most reliable electron we can put behind the mission. And it happens to be carbon-free. That same logic should guide the communities outside the fence line too. So when I say that clean energy is national security, I am not stretching the point. I am actually just saying what the people charged with defending this country have known for decades. What does the fix look like? There is no silver bullet, as we all well know. The answer is that we need more of everything: generation, transmission, and distribution together. We have badly underinvested in transmission, especially in moving power between regions, which is exactly what steadies the grid when one part of the country is hit by a storm or an attack. We also have to use the wires already in the ground better. With grid-enhancing technologies, recent studies suggest we could as much as quadruple the capacity of today's grid at roughly 20% of the cost of building new lines. And we can put to rest the myth that renewables can never stand in for firm power. With deliberate investment in long-term duration storage, clean generation can behave much more like the gas or nuclear plants it replaces. The barrier is not the technology, it is the policy, and the incumbents who would rather the policy not change. Now, the encouraging part, because there is one. Until very recently, the transition was speeding up, not slowing down. Clean sources met all of the growth in global electricity demand last year, and renewables passed coal in the world's power mix for the first time in history. And just last month, in a historic first for the US, solar generated more power across the country than coal. And the reason for these wins is cost. From Pakistan to South Korea, households and governments are turning to clean power precisely because it shields them from the next shock at the pump. This is the contradiction we are living inside. We have a federal administration rolling back the very transition that answers both of these threats. At the exact moment, a war is reminding us why we need to be transitioning. That tension will not be resolved in Washington. It will be resolved in states like Michigan, in our cities, in our utilities, in the communities every one of us in this room serves, and the courage and dedication each individual here contributes. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Francesca. I told you we weren't going to shy away from words like war and Iran and data justice and Detroit, right? We are here to talk about the real things that you are facing and how you're going to meet those challenges. Everyone is doing a great job staying on time, so I'll make one short plug. If you didn't see, if you're in the area or you're staying over tonight, one of our member groups, Jim Ryan with Veterans for Peace, is here somewhere. He has managed to get the rights, and we are showing a film this evening here at the Kellogg Center in the auditorium here called Earth's Greatest Enemy, that talks about the long history of the linkages between militarism and the climate crisis. So if you're hanging around tonight, I encourage you to come. It'll be at least an introvert activity. You don't have to listen or talk anymore, right? So we're showing a little film tonight is that piece. Next up, again, you see how this is going, right? A little data justice, national security. Again, there should be some note cards and pens on most of these tables. If you have a question, go ahead and write that down. Everil is here, and a couple other people will probably help me out because the room is nice and big and full. When we close, we'll have a little bit of time to hopefully ask just a couple questions. Next up is one of our closest movement partners. I'm really so grateful to work with you all the time. Teresa Holmesy is the Executive Director of Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action, leading the charge on public health and how our doctors and our systems could and should be relating with the climate crisis. She also always keeps her journalist hat on. If you go back and read some of her great pieces, she's won many awards, which also makes her an outstanding communicator. She's going to come share her perspective on the attacks on science and public health. Welcome to the stage, Teresa.
Right. Good morning. Show of hands, how many people here were vaccinated against smallpox? Okay, quite a bit. Well, to no one's surprise, I was not. General distribution of the smallpox vaccine stopped in 1982 because there was no longer a need for it. At its peak, smallpox was a really fatal disease. 3 in 10 people with smallpox would die. And while we don't have all the historical data, historians estimate that 300 million people died of smallpox just in the 20th century. So I'm at a climate summit, I'm talking about smallpox. Why, right? Eradicating a deadly disease that once killed millions of people is an example of one of humanity's biggest public health victories. And it's not alone. There are countless public health campaigns and biomedical technological advancements that have dramatically increased our lifespans and improved the quality of life across the world. Since the year 1900, infant mortality has decreased by 90%, and maternal mortality has decreased by 99%. It's hard to imagine that for most of human history, half of all children born would die before the age of 15. I'd be remiss, though, not to mention that these accomplishments also came at great costs to the most disenfranchised people through unethical experimentation. Benefits have also not been equitably distributed. Today, we have the know-how to improve the quality of life for so many more people in so many more ways. Thousands still die every day in the world of preventable diseases and conditions because they cannot access care and are unjustly exposed to hazards. So I had initially had the chart of the smallpox planned to show y'all. And it shows this, massive decline, right? A disease that eradicated millions of people, gone. We haven't had any cases, 0 reported cases since 1979. And the idea here is to remind us that we have the capacity to solve large existential threats. What is now a generally held belief that our children will outlive us naturally would have been unimaginable for many people who came before us. So remembering this is important for our future. And we need to know our history so that we don't backslide on our advancements, so that we don't take things for granted. And we also need to remember and hold up the ugly sides too, like how Edward Jenner tested out his smallpox vaccine in 1796 on his gardener's 8-year-old son, James Phipps, most definitely in a coercive way without informed consent. That fact doesn't make as nice of a story as my clean smallpox chart would have you believe. But it's also part of the story that we need to remember so that we don't just romanticize Jenner and the data, so that we are reminded to do things differently and better. We're all here because we recognize that climate change is an existential threat. And I think most of us are on the same page that we have the solutions and mechanisms to reverse the tide to prevent from reaching 1.6 degrees Celsius in warming, if not 1.5. And as Denise kind of opened the session today, we recognize that right now our biggest challenge is a social one. It's not technological, and I wrote this too, and not even a policy one, though talking heads and political pundits would have you believe differently. If you care about civil rights, public health, environmental justice, climate action, healthcare access, and countless other causes, this has not been a good year. But also, polluters valuing profits over people is not new. And powerful entities have always treated some human lives as disposable. As many frontline communities will tell you, they've been dismissed when raising concerns about their water and air and so many other disparities. What I think is somewhat new with the current administration is the thoughtless breakdown of systems. Expertise, both from impacted communities and scientific researchers, has been completely sidelined. That is clear in the rescission of the endangerment finding. As Attorney General Dana Nessel stated, that was a scientific conclusion upheld by the Supreme Court in 2007-2009, and it found that greenhouse gases threaten the public's welfare and can be regulated as air pollutants under the Clean Air Act. So we know that greenhouse gases are hurting our planet and our health, disrupting the fragile balance of our world, leading to more hurricanes, flooding, wildfires, extreme heat, vector and waterborne diseases, and also acting as a threat multiplier, not just for our national security, but for existing health issues and conditions. How the EPA is justifying this and countless other environmental rollbacks, it's honestly hard to keep track. Earlier this year, the administration decided to no longer account for mortality data or public health costs in their regulatory decision-making. So they're no longer calculating when making environmental protection decisions, how many lives lost, how many lives can be saved or lost in their case. A silver lining, if you can call it that, is that when faced with this blatant disregard for human life, all of these rollbacks and cuts can be galvanizing and unifying. The false mask of partisan loyalty is slipping, as it's increasingly to justify these decisions as anything but what they are. A green light for industries to do whatever they want in the name of profit without any responsibility or accountability to us, the majority. So my organization's role in representing clinicians and health professionals more broadly is to put the impacts of climate change, fossil fuel pollution, and these regulatory rollbacks into stark human terms. We so often reduce suffering to numbers, morbidity data, what the AQI says, the magnitude of a hurricane, but our goal in engaging with climate change as a health issue is to put a face to the crisis. So we recently had the honor of touring with Dr. Deborah Hendrickson, a pediatrician and author from Reno, Nevada, which is one of the fastest warming cities in the country. In her book, The Air They Breathe, she recounts wildfire smoke events in terms of an 8-month infant in her clinic who is struggling to breathe after weeks of hazardous air quality. She discusses Hurricane Harvey, which I'm originally from Houston, in terms of the 5-year-old boy named Lucas, who had to flee his house as it was being flooded and was separated from his dad, not knowing what happened to him for weeks. And she shares so many other accounts of children being directly affected by climate change. Dr. Hendrickson is a pediatrician, so she's focused on children, and she makes the point that no healthy parent, when their child is in danger, does nothing. And when I asked her how she maintains hope recently, amid all of everything that's happening, she still stands by that the love for our children and for future generations will save us. As we know, progress is not a guarantee or a passive, natural thing. The victories we've had have been hard fought for. And when it comes to something like diseases, take a different one. Measles was declared eliminated in 2000. Cases are increasing again, because of the anti-vax movement, born out of some very legitimate concerns about healthcare, but also a lack of media literacy, health literacy, and an industry-backed marketing campaign to sow doubt on our best tools in favor of snake oil alternatives. Very similar pattern around climate denial. Now that we don't think of measles as a problem, it's very easy to take the vaccine for granted and quickly regress. And I hope that with our changing climate, we don't let the new normal of frequent and extreme weather simply become normal. We can and should grieve what we've already lost, but we also shouldn't forget it. And seeing this vaccine parallel through what makes them effective is when the majority of people are immunized. We create a protective buffer for the most vulnerable people who can't. That's herd immunity, but maybe in this space we call it collective action. So we have numbers on our side because the majority of people, I believe, want a healthier and more sustainable future. And the more of us who are willing to pitch in, even when some can't or won't, the closer we are to achieving that vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. A scientific consensus, an economic consensus, a national security consensus, a health consensus. Exactly. Please remember what Teresa said. We are the majority. We are living in counter-majoritarian times, folks. And that's why those relationships to all these different sectors are so, so important. Our closer for this opening session is none other than Shalonda Baker, the University of Michigan's first Vice Provost for Sustainability and Climate Action. She joined the university after serving as Director of the Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity at the U.S. Department of Energy under the Biden administration. No longer exists, just so you know. She is our partner in launching the Community Climate Action Fellowship. Yay, students that are here. Please, please, please go check out their work and the member hosts. This is the end of their this is like their second week, y'all. So please go check out all of that great work. Shalonda, I'm so excited to hear your views on the role of higher education in this moment.
Good morning, good morning. Yes, I love it. Well, so I'm gonna do something unconventional. First of all, it's such an honor to be here, and for the last hour, I've been just looking out at this incredibly beautiful, diverse, multi-generational crowd. I want to have you give yourselves a round of applause for just showing up so early in Lansing to do this work. So. I also want to thank Denise Keel. Yes. I can't even get out the thank you. It's like, for her vision, for her steadfast leadership, for her courage, for standing up for all of us and for future generations. So Denise, thank you for what you do. Yeah. And also, to all the hands on the mic hand staff, on the staff of this hotel, those who are doing tech, taking photos, everyone who made this event possible, I want to thank you because none of this happens without your work. And so the unconventional thing I want to do is to acknowledge this beloved community because none of what we have ahead of us, none of our work is going to be possible unless we lock arms and stand shoulder to shoulder to do the work. And so you have been sitting for maybe an hour and a half, and I just want to give you an opportunity, 1 minute, to find someone you never have talked to or spoken to and just say in one sentence or two why you're here. And so just want to give you an opportunity to stand up, to move, and to do that. And I will be keeping time because I am on the clock. So please do that for about a minute. Maybe 30 more seconds.
Thank you for doing that. Listen to that.
The energy. That was amazing. Yes. Okay, that was the risk. Please go ahead and start making your way back. Go ahead and start making your way back to your seat. All right. Thank you so much. So many great conversations started. So many great conversations started in the last couple minutes, but threads I hope you continue to pull on throughout the course of the day and maybe into the evening as you watch the film. Thank you for being a part of my beloved community. I am so deeply honored to follow Attorney General Dana Nessel. I mean, God, what a leader. I mean, she's not here, but yes, right? And then these amazing panelists who, again, I'm just so blown away by. Tawana, Francesca, Teresa, thank you for your work and sharing the stage this morning. All right, so I came from Ann Arbor. I know, don't hate. Ooh, wait. Okay, so I'm new to Michigan. I've been here about 2 years. I forgot where I was. But I came from Ann Arbor, and last night, we had some storms. I mean, my family from Texas even reached out and they said, "Girl, are you okay? I think there's some tornadoes that are gonna come through." And my mom said, "I never thought that I would be saying there will be tornadoes in Michigan." But we are facing some incredible, extraordinary, unprecedented storms, not only in our state, but across our nation. And we have been weathering those storms, not just last night, but we've been weathering them for the last year and a half. And so that's why I wanted to start by having us acknowledge each other, to talk about why we are here, why we came, why we took ourselves away from a day of work, a day of childcare, elder care, to be here in community together, to figure out how we're going to weather the storms that are surely ahead of us. And so what I will also say is I think we are all exactly where we need to be. We're exactly in the right place at the right time. We were born for this moment. And so if you ever forget that, just remember your why. Remember what you shared with your person you met today. And so the question that animates every single day of my work here as the inaugural Vice Provost for Sustainability and Climate Action at the University of Michigan is, go blue, right? Ooh, is what is the role of the university in this moment? What is the role of the university in this moment? You know, when I agreed to take this role, when I was still in the Biden-Harris administration, I was like, oh, that's gonna be such an easy job, leaving government, going back into the academy, doing something really cool, maybe, setting up programs and just chilling, writing again, all the things that I remembered about being back in the academy. And when I landed, the ground shifted under us. And so the question is, what is the role? What is the role of the university in this moment, and what exactly is this moment? I don't need to tell you, but let me lay out a couple of the statistics and a couple of the facts that surround us. We know we have skyrocketing household costs, especially the necessities that really many see as human rights. So rising energy costs, rising water costs, food costs. People are struggling. the breakneck acceleration of AI and the data centers that support AI, all of that has been destabilizing. We're in a moment, rising inequality, global instability that was so well articulated by one of my panelists here. And as you all know, we are also in the middle of a climate crisis that will and already is delivering its first and worst impacts to those who are least able to recover. Who am I talking about? Low-income people and communities and nations, frontline communities who have shouldered the costs in their bodies, in their health outcomes, in their wallets of this fossil fuel-based energy system. Places like Port Arthur, where my dad comes from, Port Arthur, Texas, Lake Charles, Louisiana, and communities that make up what is known as Cancer Alley. All of those folks are going to be impacted by this climate crisis in ways that we can't imagine. And so I go back to my question, what is the role of the university in this moment? Well, we can stand in the breach. I love the next generation. So although we are not places that are built for advocacy, we are places that in times of turmoil and social change have reflected back the hopes and dreams and aspirations of our society. We have been places where students have organized to advance civil rights, connected across race and class in the belief that all people deserve to be free. We have done that at universities. And so while we weren't really built for that work, we weren't really built for advocacy, activism, the pursuit of truth, hope, all of that is in our bones. And so the call to universities in this moment is to stand in the breach, to continue to reflect back our highest ideals and to support those of you on the front lines. And so we can pour into our students, all those fellows over there who are working with MyCan member organizations. We can pour into you. We can pour into the baby who was just crying there. And we want to make sure they have everything they need to be courageous leaders, to speak truth to power, and to lean into complexity, even when it is hard, and even when it is scary or dangerous. So that's our work. And so I am so incredibly honored to be surrounded by all of you, the beloved community. I am so honored to have walked the path that I've walked that has led me to this place. Because what I know is our futures are interlinked. We are bound together with the fate of the Great Lakes, the open land that produces so much of the nation's food, with our brothers and sisters in places like Port Arthur and Lake Charles who can't weather the coming storms as well as others. We are all bound together. And in this moment, in 2026, we all, especially universities, must stand in the breach to ensure that the future is one in which we can all thrive. So thank you. And thank you, Denise and MyCan.
Okay, folks, you made it through the opening session. We have just like 1 second, so I'm gonna ask you guys just one question because it's great. And I just want a very short, like 30-second response, and you have to turn on the mic there. But the question from the audience, again, our theme is collective courage. And based on what Shalonda was just talking about and the opening from Tawana, the question is, can you describe that moment when it's hard, right? What gives you the courage to keep standing up and doing this work? little closer, whoever wants to start. There you go.
Hello? Yeah. 30 seconds. Taking the long view. That's what my goal with talking about smallpox was, is that, and recognizing that certain things are not new, that they're part of a continuation. That we are capable of doing good things. I believe in humans' capacity to do good things, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, just pass it down.
I love that. Unlike maybe many people in this room, I don't come from an environmental studies background. I have a degree in religious studies and then a master's of theological studies from Divinity School. And I think that background is what keeps me grounded in this work. I think a lot about the fact that every single tradition on this planet has some type of theology that is grounded in caring for the earth. Every single one.
If I'm honest, this work is hard every day. I've been in data justice related work for about close to 20 years. And I will say that what has kept me grounded or regrounded me is the rising social justice efforts of communities against data centers. And so, the surveillance struggle, the anti-surveillance struggle has been very difficult. But the activism, the organic activism from the ground up in communities all over the world, nonpartisan, intergenerational, has been a refuel to my spirit that I can't even describe. And so.
I love it. The ancestors keep me going. For over 200 years, my ancestors were, operating under a system that was sanctioned by law, that was looked at by neighbors as okay, and it was a reality for, again, over 200 years, so two centuries in this country. And so when things are hard, and when I realize that we seem to be up against some of the darkest forces in the universe, I think back to a great, 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 great ancestor who didn't even know that I was possible, but who hoped that I might be. And so my responsibility is to the generations that I don't know yet, and whose names I don't know, but who are expecting me to stand in that breach and to be courageous. And then I get to leave, right? I get to move on. But the hope now is that I do my role and play my part right now.
Beautiful. And I know it is said often, but for us at MyCan, it truly is all of you. Being able to work, it tears me up every time. Being able to work in community and all of you leading the way. We're a huge network with lots of strategies and tactics, but we share a singular goal: to link the climate crisis and our environmental justice and democratic pursuits in this country and in this state. And I thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today, because this is what it's about: our collective courage to keep standing up and demanding the right things to do. Because we know a lot of great things are going to happen today. I hope you have an amazing summit day in seeing all this. We did make one change that I know you're getting used to. There's a digital program this year, right? So I always joke, it gives you an excuse to look at your phone. If you're looking, you're just like, I was looking for my next session and what I'm going to go do, right? All of those pieces are on there. We have built the day to have breaks and to have network discussions. If you need a space to just talk to your fellow advocates, Amanda Robert and our Erica Bolden, our staff, will be leading that session, amazing humans. If you want to continue to educate, that's mostly in our plenary session room here, and the workshops are right next door in Big 10C. I know that we've put together something that will help you be better advocates. That is our entire mission here at the Michigan Climate Action Network, and you get a break now. So get up and stand up and get those coffees, and we will start back at 11 a.m. Thanks, everybody.